Our opening words this morning are by Sophia Line Foz. Today's children, yesterday's heritage. It is an ancient idea that the forces of nature are controlled by an almighty personal being who uses nature as a means of moral discipline. God sends earthquakes, pestilence, and famines in order to punish evildoers and grants special blessings and general prosperity to those who obey and worship God. Today's scientific conceptions of the universe are clearly contradictory to these ideas. Modern people find in the very working of natural laws a wisdom so profound that it appears irrelevant to believe the Creator would challenge them arbitrarily. Such a statement does not imply the denial of a Creator, nor does it mean that this cosmos is a chaos without control, without meaning, or without purpose. It does, however, mean that unbelievably great powers of control are within the very nature of existence. These powers are lodged in the ability of the cosmos, taken as a whole, or taken in the minutest units, to be active, to create the new, to grow, and to evolve. How these amazing powers of creativity come to be in the first place, none can know. But they are there, and all can observe. If we give these powers of creativity the time-honored and noble name of God, then such a God is immanent and natural rather than transcendental or supernatural. A natural God is so different from the traditional Western idea of God that many moderns have felt obliged to discard the use of the word altogether. This is called cross-cringe. This seems unfortunate. So great a thought and so deep an emotional response to the cosmos needs some kind of symbolic expression. If we can continue to use the word God for this new belief, it keeps unbroken the bond that unites us with the long line of deeply spiritual leaders and saints of the ages. For we too are searching as they searched, and we too continue to feel the ineffable mystery they felt. What is needed is not a new word, but new thinking and new feelings shared without evasion. We need to revise the definition of God given in the standard dictionaries, and we need to accustom ourselves to living with new thoughts and feelings in relation to God. Welcome, welcome. Do we have visitors this morning? Would you like to tell us, Bob?
Darkness
call. And now, most of you know Dr. Suzanne Reid. Suzanne is first vice president and incoming president for the next year, assuming that everybody, I think you will be. But anyway, and Suzanne is a professor of English at Emory and Henry, and she will tell you a little bit more about herself. Suzanne.
Actually, to be honest, I'm in the education department, and my husband is a professor of English, but I teach a lot of English classes. Don't ask. I was asked to be, or volunteered to read the sermon by Reverend Bruce Clear, The Theist in Me, because this is, although I consider myself a rationalist and tend to be a rationalist in most parts of my life, I have a great yearning and respect to be a theist. And I think I've decided that that it's the way I want to live, although my rational side, I'm a great doubter. Given that, when I read this sermon, I was so impressed that I really like what it said, and so although I am reading Bruce Clear's words, I'm reading very sincerely and accepting very much what he says, and have skipped the parts that I don't agree with. That wasn't many. Last week we heard the first, of course, in this three-part series. Harry Baya talked about the humanist in me, and next week we'll hear about the Christian in me by Wava Osborne. So you will get the whole gamut, not the whole gamut, I'm sure. And when we spoke of the humanist in me, in doing so, we spoke of our appreciation for and commitment to that tradition which honors reason as the arbiter of belief. And reason is the keystone of the humanist view, and it warrants our solid intellectual and religious respect and commitment. And I'll just say I and my, as Bruce Clear does here, because this is a religion of free thought. In honoring reason, humanism rejects supernaturalism. This is part of the humanism that is in me. Rejecting the supernatural does not necessarily entail rejecting the sense of the sacred, or the sense of the holy, or for that matter, the sense of the divine. There is a theist in me as well as a humanist. The God of this theme, though, is a natural, not a supernatural God. And that's the differentiation which Sophia Faz made earlier in the reading. It is not the God of children's stories, nor the God of traditional lore. This is not a God that's easy to describe or explain, and so that's why we're using a whole sermon devoted to it. The idea of God arose from the vague sources in the misty human past when people felt, perhaps as they got older, the need for a parent figure, the figure, the safety of a parent, or the support of a parent that we had or may have wished to have had, and so we call this need God. Others say that the idea arose from our ignorance of how the world works, since our ancestors could not adequately explain the weather or the seasons or the sun or the moon. They invented the idea of an all-powerful God, a supernatural conscious being who could control these mysteries that were beyond our understanding. I don't believe that the existence of God, or for that matter, any claim about God, can be proven. The question, does God exist, is kind of a non sequitur. It has no meaning. I'm taking a workshop in critical thinking myself, so I understand how that works now. The question implies that we can talk about God in the same way that we talk about cows or leprechauns or triangles, that we can say yes or no, our experience proves that this exists. I have at times mentioned the ancient Hebrew tradition in which the name of God is unutterable. In Hebrew scriptures, the name for God is rendered by the initials YHWH, which today we pronounce Yahweh. And the word Yahweh, the linguists tell us, means it causes to be or causes existence. To say that God exists is to confuse God, the source of existence, with things that exist themselves. I do not believe that God exists. I do not believe in the existence of a being which to I describe or ascribe the name God. And yet at the same time, I do believe in God. I believe in a unifying force of the universe to which I may relate and on which I may rely. It is too often the case that those who speak about God presume rather to speak for God or on behalf of God. They tell us what God approves and disapproves. They tell us what pleases God and what angers God, what God wants us to do. In most talk about God, the speaker's opinions are presented as God's opinions, and therefore the speaker doesn't need to claim responsibility for his or her own views. He says that those are God. But there's nothing reliable or certain that can be said about God. There is, I suggest, much that can be said that is interesting, and probably a few things that can be said that are useful. While we cannot speak about what God is like, we can at least speak about our human experiences of the divine. Such experiences, or the ineffable, I like that word ineffable, meaning unexplainable, unsayable, undescribable. Such experiences found continuously throughout human history are, I think, often interesting and perhaps occasionally useful. It is in that spirit that we approach the subject this morning. T.S. Eliot, that great secular poet who spent so much of his life in search of God, spoke about the human experience of the divine as the point of intersection between timelessness with time. Here's what he wrote in part. To apprehend the point of intersection of the timeless with time is an occupation for the saint. There are only hints and guesses, hints followed by guesses, and the rest is prayer, observance, discipline, thought, and action. The hint half guessed, the gift half understood, is incarnation. End quote. Hints and guesses, says Eliot. For me, that's all we can say about the divine. We begin with our own experience. We learn from experiences of others. And what we gain is an understanding that the divine, which is ineffable beyond the human world of knowledge, is merely hints and guesses. It isn't something that exists or doesn't exist. And so here are a discussion of 6 hints. Number 1, there is something that urges people to love and care for each other. And for myself, this is something that I believe, or I take as the basis for my morality. And so I don't know whether I say I know it or I believe it, but I think this is very important. Rabbi Harold Kushner, who has written movingly about the meaning of suffering, wrote the following about God. When people ask me, where is God, I tell them that I would rather rephrase the question to read, when is God? Asking where implies that God is an object located in a specific place. And if we could just find the right place, we would find God. Asking when is God gives us the idea that God can be anywhere if the right things are happening. When people are loving, brave, truthful, charitable, God is present. God is not in the place, but in the moment. End quote. Martin Buber, when asked where is God found, would reply that when people treat each other in a truly human fashion, God fills in the empty space between them, like an electric arc between poles. God is not so much in either person as in the relationship that connects one with another. The love and care that is expressed between one and other human beings is, for me, an expression of the divinity that lies between the logic and order of the universe. This, I think, is the meaning of the following line written by E.E. Cummings, which I myself don't pretend to understand. Love is a deeper season than reason. But it is awfully cute, isn't it? So the first hint about God is that there is something that urges people to love and care for one another. Number 2, life is meaningful. At least that's my experience of life. There is no particular reason why life should be meaningful. You're born, you live, you die. And my daughter used to say, and you cry, for some reason. And yet somehow in that simple formula, people have been able to fill their years of existence with meaningful acts and contribute to the greater enjoyment of life by all. The great psychologist Rob May has a definition of religion, that religion is the assumption that life has meaning. One's religious attitude is to be found at the point where he or she has a conviction that there are values in human existence worth living and dying for. End quote. So if you assume that life carries meaning, you are, by his definition, religious. Where does this meaning come from? I suppose we create it ourselves, mostly, or inherit it from others, to some extent. But it is not absurd to suggest that meaning, as its source, has what everything else has as its source. Alfred North Whitehead talks about God. It's strange that this physicist and philosopher would do that, but he offers a fairly complex but complete system. His metaphysics offer to explain why things are the way they are in fully natural, not supernatural ways. Why then did he talk about God? After searching in books about Whitehead, the author finds a sentence, only a sentence or two, but it suggests a reason for the existence of a God. Whitehead needed God, he said, the author explained, to explain novelty in the world. Novelty. That something new happens, and that something unexpected happens, such as genetic mutation, for example. The world can go on pretty much as it did today, tomorrow, but somehow, something tomorrow will be different. And another philosopher, the Unitarian Henry Nelson Wyman, called it creativity, novelty or creativity, whatever it is. There is something that allows us to face life with fresh vigor, with excitement, with meaning. Life is meaningful, or at least it can be. There's no reason why life should be meaningful, but for many people it is. Meaning arises from the novelty and creativity of the human imagination. Novelty and creativity being normal components of nature itself. From that creativity, we can create meaning. The discovery of meaning for many of us is a hint at what T.S. Eliot called the intersection of the timeless with time. Number 3, it becomes increasingly clear that science is moving toward a theory of cosmic unity and interrelatedness. While it used to be the case that science tried to study nature by isolating it into discrete parts, today science is increasingly finding that nothing can be understood in isolation from the rest of the world. Every atom in the universe is related to all other atoms. Physicist David Bohm has written about the unity of the cosmos and suggests a theory that the whole of the universe is somehow greater than the sum of its parts. And I've read hints about this and don't quite understand the language, but I get the idea, I think. The university is a living system, has energy. Just as on the smaller scale, we are living systems. It's easy to consider the human person as being greater than the sum of his parts. We are only beginning now to understand the cosmos as such a living system, too. As parents watching our children grow, we're fascinated by the development of their individual personhoods. They have their own personalities, their own memories, their own private thoughts. We recognize in our children their own consciousness and emotions. Each one, we come to conclude, has a personality that is far greater than just the sum of his or her parts. Each one is, in fact, a person or personality. So, too, Bohm would say, the universe seems to be more than the sum of its parts. Beyond the vast sea of energy that fills the void between the planets and stars, there seems to be a creative force, what he calls holo movement, H-O-L-O movement, that gives the universe a unifying character, not unlike the unifying character of someone's personality. And I can see Bob nodding, so obviously you know about it, and I'm going to ask you a question after this. The universe is more than the sum of its parts, and the universe can be observed, as Eliot so poetically noted, the intersection of the timeless with time. Number 4, I'm amazed at the human capacity to overcome tragedy and pain. For example, I personally stand in admiration of any alcoholic who is able to control that disease. I personally can't even control my appetite for food. I'm impressed by those who have suffered the deep pain of loss and can still live with hope. Where do they find their strength? Where do they find their resilience? There's nothing supernatural about it, not at all. It's altogether natural, but it's also sacred. Again, I will let Harold Kushner speak. Quote, I believe in miracles, but I believe only in big miracles, not little ones. Things like parting the big Red Sea or making the sun stand still are not miracles for me. They're special effects, often later described or defined by science, discovery of the elements that make these seem so amazing. Cecil B. DeMille or Steven Spielberg can do it easily on film, and so it can happen in nature too. But authentic miracles happen when weak people become strong, when timid people show courage, when selfish people turn generous. I can believe in God not because someone has proven it to me philosophically, but because I do see ordinary people become capable of the most extraordinary accomplishments. And I'd had a personal experience this last week when a student who's special needs student had a heart attack and was terrified of going to hell and was convinced himself that he was going to hell, did not therefore want heart surgery, and was convinced by the caring of somebody who went down to visit him, not me. And I was very heartened that he could get the courage to undertake this operation, which was successful. Number 5, there is something that connects me to the rest of the universe. That at least is how I feel. There's an underlying logic and a penetrating power that oversees the pattern of the planets, the seasons of the year, and the flux of my own life. Let me call it reason or rationality of the universe. The 19th century Romantics wrote of reason, always with a capital R, as the defined source that influenced all things. Perhaps I belong in the 19th century, but that image makes sense to me. Or perhaps I belong in the 1st century, for the early Christians also used the same metaphor when talking of logos as a word for God. Logos means reason or the logic of the universe, our ability to articulate what seems to make sense to us. An inherent orderliness or harmony that all things honor, that allows things to make sense, ultimately through science or ration. An old book published over a century ago seems to connect with the modern physicist's view of the cosmic unity. The book is entitled The Idea of God and was written by John Fiske, a philosophy professor at Harvard, in the 1880s, not long after Darwin's theories had challenged some of the traditional religious doctrines. Fiske himself felt himself to be a philosopher of evolution. Darwin, he felt, had revolutionized scientific knowledge, and it was his task to examine the philosophical implications of Darwinism. It was this effort that produced the book, And I think many of you who've got the UU magazine noticed that there was an article about Darwin and his effect on natural religion, the idea of God as a natural unit rather than superficial. In it, Fiske looks at the religious implications of Darwinism. What results is, in fact, a description of the universe that could have been written in the 20th century physicists like Bohm. Fiske writes, "If the study of physics has taught us anything else, it is that nowhere in nature is inertness to be found. All is quivering with energy." For Fiske, this persistent energy is called, no kidding, force. One wonders if Han Solo had read Fiske. It is, he says, the animating principle of the universe. But elsewhere he refers to it as power, the infinite and eternal power. And we are part of that power, just as you are part of that power. There is something that connects us to the rest of the universe. Call it reason or rationality, call it logos or logic, call it nature or God. Whatever it is hints at what Eliot described. And this part I don't understand, though I have some inkling that there are scientific theories current now that there is an energy that makes us quiver on a not us humans, but us in the universe quiver with this minuscule energy. Number 6, we live with conscience, with a sense of moral rightness, with a sense of duty. Something urges us to do that which is right. Something shames us when we do wrong, even when no one else knows. I do not believe in a God of reward or punishment, but somehow the logic of the universe compels us to develop a conscience and to know, for the most part, when we are doing right and when we are doing wrong. Immanuel Kant, who only rarely had a way with words, offers what is for me the most precise summary of religious sensibility when he wrote, "Two things fill the mind with ever new and increasing wonder and awe, the starry heavens above and the moral life within me." End quote. These two items, the starry heavens above and the moral law within me, those are the two components of any complete religion. These are the hints and guesses about God that come out of my experiences. I confess that they don't say very much about God, writes Clear. Certainly nothing reliable or certain. But we find them to be interesting, and I find them to be useful. I do not believe in the existence of God, but I do believe in God. The theist in me believes in God the same way the idealist in me believes in truth. I do not believe that something exists that can be called truth. Truth does not have its own separate existence. It permeates all of life. It makes some experiences true, authentic. Truth can be experienced, though never fully understood. I do believe that there is a truthful quality to experience that excites us and edifies us, feeds us. I suppose I believe in God the same way I believe in truth. Truths, like God, are revealed to us only in part. There's always more truth to explore, more truth to experience. The theist in me is the sort that was described by John Haynes Holmes, a great Unitarian minister of the first half of this century. When I say the word God, it is poetry and not theology.